Hello my friends and welcome back to my channel. My name is Markus and today we're talking about Nioh 2 on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series, and I'm going to present my recommended HDR settings for the LG CX and LG G2. I'm a very big fan of an accurate picture. That's why all my TVs are calibrated to a certain standard, and I'm also a very big fan of HGHE because HGIG is the most accurate way to display a HDR signal. But in the case of Nioh 2, I can't recommend to use HGIG at all. The problem with HGIG in this game, it is just way too dark. Even I would play this game in a complete dark room, there is something missing. The picture just looks very dull. Dynamic tone mapping on with my recommended settings is, in my opinion, the way how we should play this game. Oh, by the way, did I mention that Nioh 2 does not support the HDR system level calibration on the PlayStation 5, and I'm very sure the same counts for the Xbox Series? No, I didn't? Okay, Nioh 2 does not support the HDR system level calibration on the PlayStation 5, and I'm very sure the same counts for the Xbox Series. And usually when I'm doing my HDR analyze video, I test the game for several hours to make sure all my HDR settings are fitting in different locations or like day and night. In case of Nioh 2, I tested the game as well, but my progress so far is not very far because I died a lot. But after some time, I was actually getting a lot better. And now it's time to take a closer look on the HDR in-game settings in Nioh 2, in this case on the PlayStation 5, but I'm very sure you will have the same settings on the Xbox Series. Okay, so let's jump quickly into the HDR settings on the PlayStation 5, but I'm very sure you will have the same settings on the Xbox Series as well. And what you can see here right now are the standard factory settings when you start the game for the very first time. And we have a lot of options and settings in this HDR menu, and we're starting with the first one called peak brightness, which is responsible for the maximum peak brightness from specular highlights in this game. And as you can see, the maximum setting is 1000, which means 1000 nits, but no worries at all. There is actually a solution for TVs with a higher peak brightness than 1000 nits. The next setting what we have in this HDR menu is called standard brightness setting, and the factory setting is 350, which is way too much for an LG CX or LG G2, because this setting here is also responsible or impacting the maximum peak brightness in this game. The standard brightness setting 350 in combination with the peak brightness set to 1000 would gives you a maximum peak brightness of around 2000 candela in this game. When we're now changing the standard brightness setting from 350 to around 180, this gives us now a maximum peak brightness in this game of around 1200 nits. So you can see the standard brightness setting in this game has a very big impact in the maximum peak brightness of specular highlights. The next setting is called saturation, and you can change this setting as you like it because there is no impact in specular highlights or in HDR in general. And then we have two settings called screen brightness and contrast, and I would strongly recommend do not touch those settings. Leave screen brightness on 50 and contrast on 5. And now let's talk about my recommended settings for Nioh 2 on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series for the LG ZX, LG G2 and other TVs. So let's start with the LG ZX or TVs with a maximum peak brightness of 800 nits. So change the maximum peak brightness in the game from 1000 to 800 and use a standard brightness setting between 180 to 200. And yes, I'm very well aware of that the standard brightness set to 180 to 200 in combination with the peak brightness of 800 will give you a picture or maximum peak brightness a little bit above 800 nits. But the problem is if you now decrease the standard brightness even further to, let's say, 150, 160, the whole picture gets too dark, even with dynamic tone mapping on. For the LG G2 on the other hand, leave the peak brightness set to 1000 and use a standard brightness between 200 and 220. And yes, this is also slightly above the capabilities from the G2, but I found it is a very good compromise. And for TVs with a maximum peak brightness of around 1500 nits, leave peak brightness set to 1000 and the standard brightness use a value between 280 and 320. As you have seen, 350 in combination with peak brightness 1000 will gives you a little bit more than 2000 nits in this game, which of course is, in my opinion, way too much for any consumer TV right now. When it comes to saturation, and it really doesn't matter what TV or screen are you using, you can change this value as you like it. The only two settings what I would not recommend to change are called screen brightness and contrast, because regardless of what I tried, I either had a washed out picture, crushed blacks, or just a very bad experience. Screen brightness, leave it on 50, contrast on 5. So now let's talk about the TV settings, because in this case, in the case of Nioh 2 on the PlayStation 5 and Xbox, it is important actually that we changing the brightness or the black level setting, otherwise you would have a very washed out picture. To get the best contrast out of this game without having a washed out picture, I changed my brightness setting on the CX to 44. On the LG G2 on the other hand, it is called black level and I also changed it to 44. For other TVs or screens, try to reduce the brightness setting or shadow details until the washed out look is gone. And I told you already, this game does not support the HDR system level calibration on the PlayStation 5, and I'm very sure the same counts for the Xbox Series as well. And I can't recommend HDHD in this game at all because it is just way too dark in my opinion. Also, dynamic tone mapping off does not give you a proper HDR picture in my opinion. The only way how I can recommend to play this game is with dynamic tone mapping on. Okay, so quick summary for this game. It is very hard. HDR on the other hand, it is okay, nothing to show off actually, but it does look good with my recommended settings on the LG CX and G2. But again, this game is very frustrating, at least for me, because I'm just, I would say I'm just a casual gamer, and it took me a very long time actually to beat this first little boss. And I know it's just a little boss, but it took me a long time. But at the end, when I beat him, I was absolutely satisfied, and that's the point from this game, because you have to learn your enemies, you have to know how they are attacking. It's not just for pressing or smashing buttons. You really need to learn this game, and it takes some time. But after that, when you have learned the game, it's very satisfying. Strongly recommend to play this game. Try HDR, Put in the comment section, of course, what you think about this game, and let us know what TV or screen are you using and what are your preferred settings. Thank you very much for watching me. I see you guys next time. Bye.